Hi and welcome back. I'm the Liquid Tongue and this is my channel. I took last week off with everything that was going on in the political atmosphere. I figured I would just not be part of that entire week. So let's get started. Today I decided I'm going to move away from horror movies and into something a little different. It still has some dark and some kind of horrific stuff that goes on in it, but it's not a movie per se. I mean, I am going to talk about a movie, but it's not a horror movie. Now, I'm going to talk about a fairy tale that everybody in the world is familiar with, pretty much at this point. It's been around for nearly 3,000 years. Started in France and has carried forward until today, actually. It's changed a few times. The originals were much more horrific and much more graphic than what we know of the story today that we're told as children. The movie that I'm going to talk about that goes with this story kind of goes back to the original telling of the story and kind of brings the character back to its original roots. Now, I'm talking about Little Red Riding Hood. This story is known by a few names: Little Red Cap, Little Red Riding Hood, of course, the grandma story in Italy. There's different variations of this story and different portrayals. We all know the basic of it. It's a little girl on her way to her grandmother's house that is stopped and in the process of going there by a wolf. Some other cases it's a troll ogre type deal. Either way, it's a bad figure that stops this little girl, tries to talk to her. If she carries on, this character goes forward to her grandmother's house, replaces the grandmother, and tries to trick this little girl. Now, there's different variations of how this works out as well. When I originally heard this story as a child, I heard the one that probably most people have heard, where the basic ending: the woodsman comes, cuts open the wolf, pulls the grandmother out, some cases pulls Little Red Riding Hood out, depending on the story. Both of them get eaten, come out unharmed, which even as a kid, I always question that. How does a wolf just swallow two whole humans and not chew them up with the teeth and everything else? But it's a fairy tale, so we're really not going to get into that. But it's one of the things I've always thought was kind of hokey on it. Now, in college, I had to write an essay and I had to choose a fairy tale. So, of course, I picked Little Red Riding Hood. It was one of the ones on the list. And the main reason I picked it was because we had to do a modern telling of it. You could choose a movie, play, different stuff. So, I chose Freeway. Now, I don't know if this is going to film in, but I picked this movie. It's a lot of people don't talk about this movie. I feel it's kind of an underrated movie. I feel a lot of people don't even know this movie exists. Reese Witherspoon, Kiefer Sutherland are both star in this movie. It has Brooke Shields, which some people may know her. If you're older especially, probably, I don't know how many younger people would know her, but she definitely had her height in the 80s, but she's in this movie here. She also had like I think a TV show around the same time, somewhere in there, that was kind of popular a little bit after it. Either way, she's in this movie as well. It has a few known actors in it. For not being as widely known as it is, and it is kind of a gritty, more lower budget movie. There wasn't a whole lot put into this, but there's a reason behind that, I think, also just because it gives kind of more the feel that they wanted with it. Now, I don't know 100% on that, but that's just kind of the way it comes across, because it's definitely actors that could have gained more of a budget for a movie. But once again, I think it was intentionally meant to look kind of this gritty, low end, and it's kind of got comedy elements to it as well. The scene where, in the beginning of the movie, where Reese Witherspoon first gets away from, I guess it would be her parole officer, after her mother and boyfriend are taken away and arrested. She takes off in this junky little, I guess it's a station wagon. And on the handle, I don't know if it's blood or chocolate or shit. If you watch this movie, it's something I noticed. There's more and more little things that I notice in this. And So it's just one of those things to look at when she drives off. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be her car or if it's the car that her mother has. So it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of a wreck in altogether. Now, the original story of Little Red Riding Hood, our character, Little Red, she isn't rescued by a man. This movie, the original storytellings are basically about a girl that gets her way out of a situation through being intelligent, through outwitting somebody. She's basically her own heroine. She doesn't need to be rescued in any way. She does it on her own. Later on, the woodsman was added, and there's a couple other where there's a hunter that's added in place of the woodsman. But there's different variants where a male figure has been interjected to come in and come to the rescue of this girl, kind of changing the dynamic of the movie, but also showing that at points there's always this insertion of dominance that has to be put, even in our stories, where there's no reason that it should be there. This movie, Freeway, that I'm going to discuss at the same time with this, they bring you back to that original. There's in no way that she needs to be rescued in this movie. This movie is more so about how our character Red Riding already comes from a den of wolves and has been through a lot. So when she runs into her wolf, he's definitely got more than he's bargained for in the situation. And we're going to get to that too in a couple minutes. So back to the original story. In the original stories, like I said, Red comes across this whole situation in some parts. She deceives the wolf and is able to escape by saying she's got to use the restroom. There's, different variations on it. There's different variations on this story as well that has sexuality involved, where the wolf tries to trick her into taking off her clothes and burning them in a fire. There's different variations on it being a wolf altogether. There's other characters that have been injected into this point. Now there's one where it's I believe a troll or an ogre that's been interjected to where the wolf should be. And this one's kind of comical, and this is one of the ones that I talked about in my report in college, because it goes down to the point to where Little Red is fed her grandmother, and she, like, the skin she thinks is steak, the teeth she thinks are rice. Now if you're eating teeth, I don't care how much somebody cooks damn teeth, you're not gonna mistake it for rice. And I always thought that was kind of comical, because even back when these things were written, I mean, someone's got to be like, oh, we're gonna have somebody eating teeth and think it's rice. I mean, it kind of makes the characters seem kind of stupid or pretty badass that you're chowing down some teeth. But either way, there's graphic, more violent versions of this story. There's a version that comes from China, where instead of a wolf we have a tiger, and it's called the Tiger Mom. Same characters, same story, but a tiger's in place. It all boiled down to, the story was a warning towards young girls, basically about men, especially bad men, trying to coerce, do things. That's what it basically breaks down to, is not to be too trusting of I guess, strange men that you don't know. Things can happen. But it all boils down to that, is basically what this story originally was to encompass. And eventually it still kind of, followed that. But once you put in the woodsman and the whole coming to the rescue and the grandma and her both getting eaten and all that, it kind of changes some of that dynamic to more so there's a guy that has to rescue you. So it's been fiddled with to change that actual original dynamic. So now to get to this movie, in this movie, our character of Red, right out the gate, you find her in school. She's definitely comes from a low-income area in Los Angeles. She's definitely, we find out her mother's a prostitute right out the gate, and we find out that she already lives with a wolf, which would be her stepfather, that's already been preying on her since she was a child. Now, In this opening scene where we find out pretty much everything that's going on with the mother being a prostitute, a meth head, a junkie. The stepfather has been molesting Red since she's been a kid. We find more about that later, but we find he gets arrested at that point because he starts to try and do something while the mother is being arrested for prostitution. And that's how we get to the point where Red is on her own and needs to go to her grandmother's house because they want to put her in foster care. She gets her way out of that. She wants to go to this grandmother that she's only seen, I think, or talked to when she was a child and has barely any memories, but knows who she is, and that's where she wants to go. So at this point, now we have our story unfolding with our Little Red Riding Hood character on her way to her grandmother's house. Now, this character run on her way. She takes a car, she gets on the highway, and early on in the story we find out that there's a serial killer loose in LA. The I-5 killer is killing people up and down the expressway. Women are being found. So this is where and they kind of put this in, and it's kind of brilliant the way they put some of these parts together in this movie, where they have a cartoon of Little Red Riding Hood on the TV as they go to the news report where we find out about this before she starts on her journey. When Reese is taken off, her character, she has a boyfriend in this. His name is Chomper. And he comes to play later when these cops, the cops that are basically these two goofy Keystone cops, start figuring out that our Little Red Riding Hood character Reese is not the one that's guilty here. After they start talking to multiple of her classmates, and all of them talk and vouch about how that it's just not her to be that way. Because even though she comes from this whole bad scenario, she's actually a good person, and she's actually turned herself around, where we find out from when she was a child and she used to have issues. She's been putting herself, trying to, for what she has, to be more of a straight and narrow kind of person. And she goes and when she goes to talk to her boyfriend before she takes off, she asks him to go with her, and he gives her a gun at this point, tells her that it's something that she can sell, and he decides not to go because he has to go to court, and if he doesn't go, he's definitely going to get at least a year, he tells her. So she has to take off without him. And I'm not really going to get into too much on anything after that, but it's one of those decisions that somebody should have chose differently, and we find that out. And it's brought up later. It's one of the things that also leads these police officers, once they find out about him, there's a couple misconceptions about her that are overturned, and it also brings them down the path that to figuring out that she's definitely not the person that is at wrong here, that it's definitely our man that is supposed to be our model citizen is definitely the wolf. And it's one of the better things that I think that they also knew back when they did this movie, is there's a lot of people that are in power that abuse that power. And we're always quick to trust those that we're told to, that are in uniform, that have degrees or are in a lab coat, that they're supposed to be better than us and we're supposed to trust them, which is not always the case, as we found out in many decades since this movie has been made. We've seen firsthand that a lot of times the person that you can't trust is the one that you're told to trust the most. And I'm not saying we shouldn't trust people, but it's once again one of the stories that is supposed to make you aware that you need to watch your surroundings and not always just hand over and give away and put your guard down just because somebody's in a situation that you've been told before is a situation that a position that you're supposed to just respect. So, and I'm not telling you not to respect people, but just always be aware and never give anybody respect or your 100% trust, especially if you've never talked to or met this person before in your life, just because they've got a costume on. On her journey, of course, she comes across this character. Now, Kiefer Sutherland plays the wolf. This movie basically portrays letting us see wolves from two different perspectives, which I also think is brilliant because it brings back the whole warning of of men that can prey upon a woman, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the druggy meth head that her stepfather was. We all know those people exist, but when we've run across our wolf in this movie, it happens to be a man that works at an all-boys school. He's a psychiatrist. He's well-to-do. He's married. He's rich. He has everything. He's everything that society tells us is supposed to be our safe person, somebody that you can trust. And when he comes across our Red, he acts exactly that. He offers her a ride because her car's broken down. They have a conversation where he gains her trust. And right out the gate, because he is a therapist and he starts talking to her about her issues, she opens up about things that happened in her past, and moves forward from there to the point to where then it's revealed that he is the serial killer and wants to kill her, and she goes through issues to escape him. And I'm not going to get into too much because I'm hoping people will watch this movie after you guys hear this and listen to this and get kind of a review between this, that you might go check this movie out or seek it out and watch it, because it's definitely worth the watch. One way or the other, without spoiling any of it, there's a confrontation between the two, and she leaves him for dead, which he ends up surviving. We find out he's maimed. Everybody believes that she tried to rob him. They don't want to believe that she was attacked by him first, because she's a girl with a record that we find out comes from a poor family. All the issues that normally would put somebody in a situation where nobody wants to listen to you, which should never be the case, but that's unfortunately the way society is, and they definitely let you see that in this movie. So she ends up going through, is in prison while she's on trial, and everything that's going around about this trial, you can definitely see they're going to railroad her on this situation. So the wolf is basically able to manipulate and bring everything down on her, even after she defended herself the first time and got away from him. So like I said, she ends up going to prison. In prison, we find out she's not exactly, which we find out a lot of times, she's not exactly this defenseless, unable to take care of herself little girl. And as she's going through these stages, as we're leading through the movie, she's becoming more and more, I would say, capable of taking care of herself. It's bringing her more and more to a point where she's definitely not somebody that the wolf can handle on his own without some kind of deceit, I would say, because straightforward she's gonna take him down one way or the other. And that's kind of what this story was originally about, is a woman that can defend herself in a way, or is smart enough to get away from it, and it's supposed to be something that a woman should or it should kind of see as you don't have to take shit, I guess, is the easiest way. And I'm not going to ruin the end of this movie either, because there is we have some a little bit of like comedy where you got these two goofy cops that are involved in this, that eventually stumble upon the truth that, hey, maybe this girl isn't lying, this guy is this killer, and they go to try and help her, but she's already found her way to get out. So once again, she doesn't need the help of these two men. And I kind of think they purposely used the two cops, one to represent the woodsman and one to represent the hunter, because there was two different men that were interjected into the story. So kind of it puts them back in it, but it kind of makes them a couple of buffoons, to where they're not somebody that's going to rescue her. And by the time they do find everything out, they're late. They're late to the lunch. She is confronted by Kiefer Sutherland, because we all know the wolf does eventually get to the grandmother's house and take the place of the grandmother. And in this, we find out Kiefer Sutherland plays a pretty bad character in this. He does some pretty malicious stuff to people, so he is not too kind to grandma when he kills her, and he definitely lets Red know that. And we have a definite scene of a fight and a struggle between the two of them, and we pretty much know how the outcome is going to come. Red is the heroine of this story. So she does successfully get her way out of this situation. I'm not going to spoil how the whole scene goes down, but it's a pretty well done. There's a couple pretty good fight scenes in this movie that Reese Witherspoon is involved in. In the prison, she has some. She's got another one where she fights Kiefer Sutherland out on the highway. She fights him at the end of this movie. I mean, she does multiple fight scenes in this, and for the time frame and the age and how early on in her career this movie is done, it's one of, I think, a really good role that she pulled off. This movie all around is kind of one of those little lost gems. Now, like I said, it's not shot in the highest quality, and it's definitely not in 4:16 or whatever the ratio is, or 9:16. So you're not going to find, one in HD. But when you do find it, it's definitely something you'd want to sit down and give a spin. Now, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you for stopping by again. Please hit like and subscribe. I'm going to be moving forward with things. I'm going to be going into the comic book realm coming up real soon here, and down some of the roads of fantasy and sci-fi. And I will return to horror and stuff like that down the road. It's just going to kind of roll through. But I figured I'd kind of transcend the situation with something that has a dark past and a little bit of darkness to it, but also isn't quite what horror is. So, once again, thanks for stopping by. I'm the Liquid Tongue. Like, subscribe, and thank you. And that's my dog, Beans, in the background. I guess he wants you to like and subscribe too. Anyways, have a good night. Bye.